In 1968, radical feminist Valerie Solanas attempted to assassinate Andy Warhol. She shot him in the liver, spleen, lungs, and stomach, leaving him in a corset for the rest of his life. The woman turned out to be a schizophrenic who called for the extermination of males to create a utopia for women. According to a 1996 Super Mario manga, one-up mushrooms grow from the bodies of dead Marios, perpetuating the cycle of life and death. In 1971, Fleetwood Mac had to cancel a sold-out show when their guitarist Jeremy Spencer suddenly went missing. He was found a few weeks later with shabby clothes and a shaven head after joining the Children of God, a cult founded by a pedophile that was responsible for the widespread abuse of thousands of children. In April of 2024, fitness influencer Joey Swoll faced a terrifying near-death experience during what was supposed to be a routine 30-minute heart test. While undergoing an angiogram, a piece of medical equipment broke off inside his heart, causing him to crash mid-procedure. Doctors had to perform a 6-hour emergency surgery to remove the foreign object and stabilize him, even resorting to implanting a heart pump to keep him alive. The lead surgeon described the situation as unprecedented and miraculous, saying Joey came dangerously close to dying on the table. Here's a terrifying video of a diver encountering a candiru fish and clenching his knees for good reason. These spiny parasitic fish have been rumored to swim up human urethras, latching on with barbed spines and requiring extremely painful surgery to remove. While dissecting the donated body of a 78-year-old man, medical students were stunned to find he had not one, not two, but 3 tallywhackers. The 2 extras were tiny, tucked-away trouser snakes hiding deep in his beanbag. But since they were completely hidden and non-functional, there's a good chance the guy went his whole life unaware he was packing a secret sausage trio. In 2021, 16-year-old Kennedy Littledyke was ejected from her car during a high-speed crash in Idaho, miraculously landing on a 30-foot-high power line dangling upside down by her now broken leg. The pressure from the wire pinched her femoral artery, preventing her from bleeding out, while an electrical burn cauterized another wound in her neck. She hung there for about an hour until rescuers finally cut the power and freed her. Despite having 21 surgeries and losing her leg, Kennedy miraculously survived, and now shares her story and journey to recovery to inspire others online. In 2020, 16-year-old promising soccer player Alexander Gomez was tragically shot and killed by police in Mexico after officers allegedly mistook him for a criminal when he was riding his motorcycle to buy a soda. The killing sparked national outrage and drew attention to police violence in Mexico. At the boy's funeral, his teammates honored him by placing his coffin in front of a goalpost and gently kicking a soccer ball against it to score his final goal, a moving tribute to a life full of promise that was cut tragically short. Mark Wahlberg was addicted to cocaine by the age of 13 and had committed at least 20 criminal offenses by the time he turned 21. In 1988, he was arrested for the unprovoked racist attack of 2 Vietnamese Americans and left one of the victims blind. Marky Mark was initially charged with attempted murder, but only ended up serving 45 days in prison since he was only 16. Here's a video of professional violinist Dagmar Turner playing her instrument while doctors removed a tumor from her brain. They asked her to play the violin during the surgery to ensure that her musical abilities weren't damaged by the delicate procedure. In 2017, an American man consumed a ghost pepper in an eating contest and had to drink 6 glasses of water to cool off. He then vomited so many times that he tore a hole in his esophagus and was rushed to the emergency room where doctors found his left lung had nearly collapsed. He spent 23 days in the hospital and was sent home with a gastric tube. Immediately after she was murdered, Dee Dee Blanchard was praised as a beautiful, endlessly giving woman who selflessly dedicated her entire life in service of her debilitated daughter. But this image would quickly fade once it was revealed that Dee Dee was actually a massive con artist who suffered from Munchausen syndrome by proxy, a classified mental disorder in which a caretaker makes someone appear ill to receive attention. And her abuse wasn't limited to just Gypsy. For starters, she was a full-on predator considering she got pregnant within 1 year of dating a 17-year-old boy when she was 24. Her stepmother Laura claims that Dee Dee once poisoned her food with Roundup weed killer, causing an extensive stay in the hospital. Other relatives believe that she may have also starved her own biological mother to death. When Dee Dee was murdered, her father and stepmother refused to pay for her funeral and ended up flushing her ashes down the toilet, saying she got what she deserved. Aside from being assassinated, Honest Abe lived through his fair share of dark days. He was kicked in the head by a horse at age 9, nearly severed his thumb with an axe, got frostbite on his feet, was clubbed in the head during a robbery, survived malaria and smallpox, and experienced the deaths of his mother, sister, and 2 sons. He was so deeply depressed throughout his life that he refused to carry a knife out of fear that he would harm himself. There is only one photo ever taken of Abraham Lincoln giving a speech, and his killer John Wilkes Booth can be seen in it. A few days before he was assassinated, Lincoln told multiple people about a disturbing dream he had. In the dream, Lincoln saw a soldier standing next to a casket and could also hear people weeping. Still dreaming, Lincoln asked the soldier, "Who's dead in the White House?" The soldier turned to him slowly and said, "The President." The man who was sitting next to Lincoln on the night he was shot was overwhelmed with guilt for the rest of his life for not preventing it. He slowly went insane and eventually stabbed his wife to death before being committed to a mental asylum for the rest of his life. In August of 2023, 73-year-old Roger Leadbeater was taking his usual evening walk with his rescue dog Max through a quiet park in Sheffield when he was suddenly hunted and murdered in one of the most savage random attacks in UK history. Security footage later showed 32-year-old Emma Boroway, a schizophrenic patient who had escaped from a psychiatric unit 2 days earlier, pacing around the park and hiding in the bushes before ambushing him. She stabbed Roger more than 50 times, including through the eye and repeatedly in the back as he tried to crawl away, inflicting a total of 124 separate injuries. His hands, arms, and legs were covered in defensive wounds, showing he fought desperately until he collapsed and died on the ground. When his family returned days later to leave flowers in the spot he died, they found the scene still covered in his blood, with the outline of his body visible and dog prints stamped around it. Emma later told police the devil had tricked her and called the killing a ritual sacrifice. Best known as the original voice for nearly all the female characters in South Park, prolific voice actress Mary Kay Bergman stunned the animation world in 1999 when she took her young age of 38. Despite her cheerful public persona and thriving career, she was secretly battling severe mental illness, later identified as bipolar disorder and anxiety, which she kept hidden from friends, colleagues, and even her husband, fearing it would damage her career. Mary's sudden death sent shockwaves through the voice acting community, since no one had any idea she was suffering behind the scenes. A poor spider that was posthumously named Lawrence got stuck in this glass and couldn't climb up the smooth surface. So it apparently tried to web its way to the top until its silk ran out and it eventually perished. In 2020, Russian influencer Yekaterina Didenko's 29th birthday celebration at a Moscow pool complex turned tragic when approximately 55 pounds of dry ice were poured into the swimming pool. Intended to create a fog effect, the dry ice produced a massive amount of carbon dioxide gas upon making contact with the water, leading to suffocation and chemical burns among attendees. 3 people ended up dying as a result, including Didenko's husband, who succumbed to his injuries in the hospital. When he was 38 years old, Jerry Seinfeld met a 17-year-old girl in Central Park and started dating her. He would pick her up from high school, and the relationship lasted 4 years despite a 21-year age gap. Not to mention there's an episode of Seinfeld where the guys stare at the cleavage of a 15-year-old girl and Jerry defends it as being normal. In 2010, a high school in Pennsylvania issued Apple MacBooks to each of its 2,300 students, then remotely activated the webcams to spy on them at home. Without telling its students or their parents, the school secretly took pictures of the children in their own home and monitored their chat logs and the websites they visited. The whole scandal was only uncovered when one student was eating Mike and Ike's in his bedroom and the school tried to bust him for taking pills. The district was eventually ordered to pay $600,000 in lawsuits filed against the school after it was found to be in possession of more than 50,000 webcam shots of the student. To unlock the secrets of a genius, the man who performed Einstein's autopsy stole his brain and kept it in a jar for 20 years. He found that the part of Einstein's brain that processes math and language was 15% bigger than the average human's. Throughout history, a total of 9 nuclear submarines have been lost around the world. Most of them are still on the ocean floor with nuclear weapons that are still intact. A 17-year-old boy from Mexico City died after his girlfriend gave him a hickey. The suction created a blood clot that traveled to his brain, eventually causing a stroke. When the Soviet Union was pushing toward Berlin during World War II, a Nazi SS soldier was forced to play piano for his captors. They made it clear to him in sign language that he would be executed the moment he stopped playing. He played for 22 straight hours, after which he collapsed in tears. They congratulated him, then shot him. In 2001, Ashton Kutcher had a girlfriend who was murdered by a serial killer after being stabbed 35 times in her own home. Kutcher would end up testifying in the trial of the Hollywood Ripper, who would later confess to murdering at least 10 women over a 15-year span. Author of Frankenstein, Mary Shelley, lost her virginity on top of her mother's grave. She also kept her dead husband's heart and carried it around for 30 years until her own death. According to the FBI, if you're murdered in the United States, there's only about a 40% chance that your killer will be found and punished. In 2009, a Russian man went to the doctor suspecting that there was something wrong with his lungs. Initially, doctors thought they were dealing with a tumor, but it ended up being something they'd never seen before. It turned out that years ago, the man accidentally inhaled the seed of a fir tree and it started growing inside of him. A 19-year-old girl named Olga was camping with her stepfather in Russia when a vicious mother bear suddenly attacked them. After the bear broke her stepfather's neck and smashed his skull, Olga attempted to run. But the bear chased her down and soon grabbed her by the legs before attacking her. Olga then managed to make 3 phone calls to her mother while being eaten alive by the bear and her 3 cubs. In the first phone call, she screamed, "Mom, the bear is eating me. Mom, it's such agony. Please help me." At first, her mother thought it was a sick prank, but soon heard the true horror in her daughter's voice and the sound of the bears chewing and growling. But she could only helplessly listen in horror to her daughter's screams for mercy. In her last call, nearly an hour after the first, the bears had left her, but Olga knew she wasn't gonna make it. She said, "Mom, it's not hurting anymore. I don't feel the pain. Forgive me for everything. I love you so much." The call eventually cut off, and the 2 bodies were found that same day. Christine Palillo was a bullied outcast at school until 2 popular girls befriended her and gave her a makeover, helping her achieve the title of Miss Irresistible from her school's student body. But just a few months later, Christine and her drug addict boyfriend would end up brutally murdering the girls and 2 others in a botched drug deal. One of the girls tried desperately crawling to her phone after being shot in the groin, until Christine bashed her skull in with the butt of her revolver. Serial killer Dennis Rader used to install security systems for homeowners. Many of his clients wanted the security systems to keep the BTK killer from ever entering their homes, unaware that he was in fact the one installing them. In 2017, Glenna Durham killed her husband after shooting him 5 times. Soon afterwards, the couple's pet African gray parrot started repeating the words "don't effing shoot" in the husband's voice. These were assumed to be the husband's last words, and the woman was eventually found guilty of first-degree murder. Compared to today's standards, ancient Romans were pretty disgusting. They had public toilets that were never cleaned and there was no toilet paper. Instead, you had to wipe yourself with a sponge on a stick that everyone shared. The Romans also made their toothpaste out of mouse brains and used urine as mouthwash and detergent. The urine industry was so big that there was even a tax on it for a period of time. But if just living in ancient Rome sounds bad enough, you better not have been a criminal. During halftime at some arenas, certain criminals were torn apart by wild animals. Some prisoners were also substituted into plays as punishment, so if a character died in the play's story, a real criminal would die on stage. And the worst of the worst criminals, such as men found guilty of rape, often had their testicles crushed between 2 stones. Janis Joplin changed her will just 2 days before dying of a heroin overdose in 1970. She gave her estate to her parents, gave additional wealth to her siblings, and set aside $2,500 for her friends to throw a party in her honor and, quote, "get blasted after I'm gone." When penguins can't find love, they often waddle off to die alone. As a children's hospital worker in Tennessee, Georgia Tan would lie to new mothers and tell them their babies died after childbirth, only to turn around and sell them to pedos willing to pay top dollar. It's estimated that she stole more than 5,000 babies over a 26-year span, but Tan passed away in 1950, just months before her crimes were uncovered. When a man from Brazil was born with an upside-down head, doctors told his mother to let him starve to death. But despite this debilitating condition, his mother never gave up on her baby, and he miraculously grew up to become an accountant and works today as a motivational speaker. In 1985, a 13-year-old Colombian girl was trapped up to her waist in volcanic mud flow. Knowing she would certainly die, volunteers and rescuers did their best to comfort her. She died after 60 hours and her photo became iconic. BBC regularly rehearses the Queen's death to ensure that their cover of it is flawless when she actually does die. The reason you wake up right before you're about to die in a dream is because your brain doesn't know what it's actually like to experience death. In 2009, a man sued Pepsi when he was traumatized after finding a mouse in his Mountain Dew. But Pepsi attorneys said this was impossible since Mountain Dew would completely dissolve a mouse within 30 days. Pepsi won the case upon showing that the can was purchased 74 days after it was manufactured. This woman went to the absolute extreme just to cheat on her husband. In 2016, California woman Sherry Papini suddenly vanished after going out for a jog. Just as her husband and 2 little kids were losing hope, 3 weeks later, Sherry was miraculously found alive by the side of a highway. She was tied up with a bag over her head, had a broken nose, was badly emaciated, and covered in bruises. Sherry claimed that 2 Hispanic women had abducted and tortured her, but she was never able to see their faces. The local community quickly rallied behind her, even offering donations to aid in her recovery. But behind the scenes, law enforcement was skeptical of Sherry's claims. They eventually found DNA on her clothing that matched her ex-boyfriend James Reyes, who had no choice but to admit that the story was a complete hoax. Papini had faked a kidnapping, severely beat herself up, and lied to federal agents, all just to spend time with her ex-boyfriend without her family finding out. Her husband divorced her the day she was arrested, while she was sentenced to 18 months in prison in order to pay $300K to the state. In 2000, a love triangle featured on The Jerry Springer Show resulted in a real-life murder just hours after the episode aired. This segment, titled Secret Mistresses Confronted, brought together 42-year-old Ralph Panitz, his new wife Eleanor, and his ex-wife Nancy Panitz in a televised spectacle of screaming and public humiliation. On the night the episode aired, weeks after it was taped, Ralph reportedly watched it while drinking at a bar in Sarasota, growing increasingly enraged as his private shame played out on national television. Apparently fueled by humiliation and fury, he drove to his ex-wife Nancy's home, where she had been granted temporary possession during their divorce, and launched into a violent assault. He beat her so viciously that she was found naked, bloodied, and lifeless on the floor, her body showing signs of a prolonged and violent beating. Ralph was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison in 2002. The case remains a haunting example of how reality TV's thirst for drama can spill into real-life horror. Josephine Myrtle was born with a rare genetic anomaly known as dipagus. Her body was completely normal down to the waist, but below it she had 2 pelvises and 4 legs. Despite her condition, she still managed to marry a doctor and have 5 children. A healthy human heart can only beat for about 1 minute when removed from the body, but the heart of a coke user can beat for up to 25 minutes outside of the body. This is what a Japanese execution chamber looks like, where convicts are hanged from a long rope connected to the trap door. In Japan, prisoners on death row aren't told when they'll be executed until an hour before it happens. They wake up each day wondering if it'll be their last. In 1957, a stray dog named Laika became the first animal to ever orbit the Earth when she was placed inside the Soviet spacecraft Sputnik 2. The dog was originally reported to have died painlessly in orbit about a week after takeoff. But nearly 50 years later, it was revealed that she likely died from overheating and panic just a few hours after the mission started. Florida man developed star-shaped cataracts after he was zapped by 14,000 volts of electricity. While he got some of his vision back after surgery, he's still legally blind as a result of the mishap. In 2007, a man from Florida woke up in the middle of the night with a severe headache. After he drove to the hospital, doctors found a bullet in his head. It turned out his wife attempted to murder him in his sleep by shooting him in the head. In 2012, a woman from New York donated her kidney to save the life of her boss. But her boss then fired her when she took too long to recover from the operation. In 2001, a woman from Texas hit a homeless man with her car and his body became lodged in her windshield. She drove home with him still stuck in her car and repeatedly apologized to the man when he was in her garage. But she never called for help, and the man died 2 days later still stuck in the woman's windshield. She ended up receiving 50 years in prison for the bizarre murder. In October of 2015, 21-year-old Dutch medical student Sophia Koetsier vanished while on a Ugandan safari after stepping away for a bathroom break just a short distance from her lodge. About 3 weeks after she disappeared, searchers found her belongings in eerie condition. Her purse and one shoe neatly placed on the ground, while the other shoe was never recovered, scraps of her fabric tied to branches like trail markers, and her underwear bizarrely hanging 15 feet high in a tree. No blood, remains, or sign of a struggle were ever found, as authorities quickly wrote it off as a wild animal attack, though experts noted that predators don't hang underwear in trees or arrange items so deliberately. Her mother has spent years fighting the official explanation, describing how it felt like the earth had simply swallowed her up, since not even a single fragment of a bone has ever been recovered. Nearly a decade later, Sophia's disappearance remains one of Africa's most haunting safari mysteries. If you ever see a kangaroo standing in the water like this, you should get out of there immediately. He's likely waiting for a pursuer to join him in the water so that he can drown it. It was developed as a defense mechanism against dingoes, but has been performed on innocent household dogs. Here's a photo of anti-war demonstrators protesting outside the 1968 DNC in Chicago. Shirtless protester Frank Plata was later drafted by the U.S. Army and killed in the Vietnam War. A Florida man named Brian Dwayne Stewart told his new neighbors that he would kill them with kindness. He then tried to kill them with a machete that he apparently named Kindness. Last summer, an 88-year-old French man caused an entire hospital to be evacuated for the strangest of reasons. He had a shell from World War I stuck inside of his anus, which was considered a bomb threat, and a defusing team was called in. They determined the shell was not at risk of exploding, and it was surgically removed by doctors. This photo shows the dramatic differences between two boys who were exposed to the same smallpox source in 1901. One of them was vaccinated, the other one was not. These punishing shoes were a type of medieval torture device. The victim would have to stand on their tippy toes for as long as they could before falling back and having rusty spikes jammed into their heel. Artist William Udermolen was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease in 1995. Over the next 5 years, he drew these self-portraits of himself which displayed the devastating effects of the disease. In 2022, a 25-year-old woman named Sharaban wanted to escape personal and family issues in her life. So she devised a crazy plan to fake her own death and searched social media for lookalikes, eventually stumbling upon a German beauty influencer named Khadija who closely resembled her. After promising the model free beauty treatments, Sharaban kidnapped her and stabbed her 56 times before leaving the body in her car, attempting to pass it off as her own. The influencer was initially misidentified as Sharaban until DNA testing revealed the disturbing truth, as her horrific plan resulted in life in prison. Australian woman Noella Rukunko became famous in 2015 after crashing her own funeral. She was presumed dead after her husband paid several hitmen to kill her upon wrongly suspecting that she was cheating on him. But instead, the hitmen spared her life since they knew her brother and refused to kill women or children. They revealed her husband's plot to her before providing all the evidence and helping her fake her own death. Days later, Noella walked into her own funeral that was organized by her husband, causing him to faint on the spot. He was later arrested, confessed to the crime, and sentenced to 9 years in prison for incitement to murder. The details revealed in Michael Jackson's autopsy report were nothing short of disturbing. He was almost completely bald and had a number of cosmetic tattoos, including permanent eyeliner and lip liner. He had puncture wounds all over his arms and had nothing but pills in his stomach at the time of death. Michael had also undergone at least 10 nose jobs, leaving him with a left nostril that was almost completely collapsed. A Dutch teenager who was going bungee jumping in Spain died after a horrible misunderstanding. The instructor with poor English said no jump, but she heard it as now jump and ended up jumping straight to her death. When a photojournalist took this picture of a little girl in Syria, she raised her arms in surrender because she thought the camera was a gun. In 1987, Kenneth Parks drove 12 miles to his mother-in-law's house and stabbed her to death in the middle of the night. But Kenneth didn't receive any jail time because his lawyer was able to prove that he was sleepwalking the entire time. On December 11, 2002, 22-year-old Alan Menzies murdered his best friend, 21-year-old Thomas McKendrick, inside his home in West Lothian, Scotland. Menzies had become obsessed with the film Queen of the Damned, watching it more than 100 times, and later told police he believed the character Queen Akasha was visiting him and instructing him to kill for immortality. When McKendrick came over that morning, Menzies attacked him with knives and a hammer, claiming the violence was triggered after McKendrick insulted Akasha. After killing him, Menzies drank McKendrick's blood and ate part of his head, stating this was the necessary process to become a vampire. He then placed the body of his best friend in a wheelbarrow and buried it in a shallow grave, where it remained undiscovered for the next 6 weeks. In court, prosecutors revealed Menzies had a long history of serious violence starting at age 14, including multiple stabbings. He literally told the court, "If you don't murder somebody, you can't become a vampire." Menzies received a life sentence with at least 18 years before parole eligibility, but in 2004, less than 2 years after the murder, he was found dead in his prison cell. In 1987, North Korean spy Kim Hyun-hui blew up Korean Air Flight 858, killing all 115 passengers on board. After failing to take a cyanide pill afterwards, she told interrogators it was a direct order from Kim Jong-il that she had no way of backing out of without being killed. The woman was originally sentenced to death, but later pardoned by the South Korean president, who said she was merely a brainwashed victim of the real culprit, the North Korean government. Hyun Hui ended up marrying one of her interrogators, and they lived happily ever after with their 2 children. While recording the audio version of his book Charlotte's Web, it took author E.B. White 17 takes to read the death scene of Charlotte. He's said to have walked outside for a breather, come back in, and started crying again every time he got to that moment. In 1184, the King of Germany was conducting a meeting with his noblemen on the 2nd floor of a church when the floor suddenly collapsed. The king, whose seat was on a separate section that didn't collapse, watched in horror as 60 of his noblemen drowned in the cesspit located below that hadn't been emptied out in years.